hospitable downtown area of San Francisco, the formerly hospitable area of downtown San Francisco. It did not take long to discover Frank's mind. He was very bright and willing to take stand on a wide range of topics. We learned to struggle and exchange ideas in an exciting and mutually, I hope, stimulating way. I remember a lunch in the late 1970s walking on Market Street. We passed Stacy's, a bookstore, it's now no longer there. Anyway, Frank pulled me into the store and took a book off the display and said, "Jerry, you have to buy this book." That was the book we looked at before, A Road Less Traveled. He insisted that Jerry buy this book. It had been a New York Times bestseller for 10 years. He dragged me into discussions of psychoanalysis and religion. Frank saw the book as an extension of the Robert Frost poem, The Road Not Taken. The book contains real clues into Frank's thoughts and thought processes. The quote for this memorial service, "I did it my way," certainly fit Frank and our conversations at the time very well. It sounds like something Peck might write. Consider the following words from the book. "No words can be said, no teaching can be taught that will relieve spiritual travelers from the necessity of picking their own ways, working out with effort and anxiety their own paths through the unique circumstances of their own lives towards the identification of their individual selves with God." That, I believe, was Frank. He did it his way. I left the Bay Area in 1981 to help the recovery effort at 3 Mile Island. I was divorced at the time. I mention this because this was a real blow for me. I was in a new place with little support. Frank called often and was very difficult. Frank called often. He was the only person from California, my California life, that did. That period was very difficult for me. He knew I was not happy and he sought to help. For a while, Frank was my only lifeline to sanity. I never forgot that and his support and concern. Frank and Rosemary had a really wonderful relationship. Frank often talked about their honeymoon that included France, a favorite place for me. He especially wanted to see the walls of Carcassonne, a medieval city. He had been there on his honeymoon with Rosemary. He had many trips to share and plans for more. He planned a trip to Göbekli Tepe, excavations in Turkey. He knew a great deal about archaeology, and especially this ancient site, and talked about it for years. He never went there. I think that trip was on his bucket list. I saw Frank in his Alameda home fairly often. Rosemary, Frank, and I became very close. Her home was filled with her photography and her books about photography. It was an exciting and artistic environment. I loved her work. I loved visiting and did so whenever I could, including staying overnight once in a while. Frank commuted by ferry to his office in San Francisco. He truly had a wonderful home, fantastic commute, and rewarding work environment. He was highly respected as an expert in his field. When Janet came into my life, Frank was there. I remember one visit in particular. I was getting ready to propose marriage to Janet. It was in the spring of 2003. Frank and I met for dinner in Frederick, Maryland. In a characteristic style of his, he got very interested in my proposal, my project, proposing to Janet. He went over and over my wedding proposal. Frank listened to my repeats and was a caring sounding board and made lots of suggestions. He really helped me with courage. Janet, Frank, Rosemary, and I became a foursome. We visited back and forth to Alameda and Gaithersburg. Frank retired from Bechtel, and he and Rosemary sold their Alameda home and moved to Reno. Frank talked often about doing noise control research and writing some original papers during his retirement, another item that was on his bucket list. He believed he had some excellent and creative ideas to contribute to this area of science and was anxious to do so. On my last visit to Reno, I saw a large pile of draft papers on his desk in the garage. Also, there were draft papers all over the house. That is true. Yes, there were papers all over that house. I know he went to at least one noise control conference after US Bechtel. The last publication I could find was in 2010. Maybe that last unfinished paper is somewhere in Reno. Frank was involved in some civic organizations. He talked of going here and there and giving a speech on a topic he was an expert in. At least some of the talks were about places he had been. The recognition he received from these talks was important to him. Frank, Rosemary, Janet, and I spent time visiting in Reno and did some outings together in Nevada, including Donner Pass, Donner Lake, and frontier towns and Reno. On his last visit in June of 18, Rosemary had a stroke in March. Frank put her into a rehab facility and then a care home because he was clearly unable to care for her. I went to Reno in June to support Frank and to love Rosemary. I stayed for 5 days, and this was the last time I saw either of them. Eating with Frank during the last visit meant going out for food, usually to a casino for a discount meal. That was also my father. Now, I remember as a kid, you go to McDonald's, wherever place it was, you would make the family's order, and you want drinks and that, and the court would say, what size you want? Small. that absolutely, but that's absolutely my father. There was no need for cooking. He was an expert at cheap and wonderful food that someone else prepared. He was well known at the places he went. At that time, Frank started a relationship with a Mormon group that came to his house and cleaned it. They cut his grass. He went to one of their homes for dinner several times. I don't know the person's name. And Frank and I went to a Mormon picnic one night after a visit to see Rosemary. They were wonderful and friendly. Obviously, they liked Frank and opened their hearts to him. In conclusion, I did it my way. Certainly was an accurate description of Frank's approach to life. I have known very few scientists with Frank's critical approach to the search for truth. I am very glad to be able to say goodbye. He would have been glad to be here in Alameda to say goodbye, and sharing his life was a privilege. And it says something for anyone that you would have a relationship of that long and that have that much impact on somebody that, absent the health concerns now, would have gotten on a plane and flown across the country at his own expense, stayed here, and flown back just to be here at this service. And there are a lot of other people that would like to have been here, but they health reasons they can't they couldn't afford to come here, or they were not because of health concerns, they're elderly, they wouldn't be able to travel here. So there's a lot more people from my father's life that if they could be here, they would be here. And the next one of the decision points, this wasn't one of the real key ones, was in the 1980s some point. He got married, this is wife number 2, Lee Alexander. And they stayed together about 5 years, and she got her education, and she moved on. And she was on the email list. I have not received any communication back from her. And I'll come to Rosemary here in just a minute. Now, by this time, I'm an adult. I've graduated college. I'm doing my profession, and he's my father, so stay in touch, you call, you visit on occasion, holidays together. I can't say that we were close. Almost all of our discussions over time, until we get to the very end part of our story in a little bit, were about politics or history or science and those type of things. It wasn't about spirituality or anything that maybe really matters as a person. It was on this level, and that was the level that I really knew him for most of my adult life. Rosemary, so I don't remember when they first got together, but they got married in 2001, in this very facility here. And that's a part why we came back here. We also had my father's 80th birthday here. We had Rosemary's memorial service here as well. So there's something kind of attracting, and the intersection of keep bringing us back to this location. This was the most I was more on the inside of the first marriage, and on the outside of this one. But this seems like it was his best relationship and his best marriage, and I think it was because she was the best of his wives at letting him do it his way. and accommodating that and giving really her just unconditional love. And she obviously can't be here, having already passed. But in the papers that we found a card that she had written to him. He was probably going to India in 2009. So she gave him a card to be opened the first night you get to India.
Yeah.
So please bear with me as we read through this. This is what Rosemary would say if she could be here today. My beloved Frank, this card is the personification of you, noble, kind, magnificent, passionate, and loving. Everything beautiful in this image, and you can't really see it very well, is from pyramid-like. There's this big pyramid-shaped rock in this lake. And it's shot very nicely. It's in a twilight or a dawn. So the sun is just coming up or going down. Beautiful picture. Everything beautiful in this image is also beautiful in you. Don't forget that. I shall miss you oh so very much. I feel half a person and somehow incomplete without you. I am very excited for you and know how much this trip means to you in so many ways. When you return, the kids will be here, I think Rosemary's children, and it will be a wonderful time for us to focus on them and make their stay with us fun, memorable, and especially loving. I shall miss you so very much, and at the same time, I look forward to a quiet time to reflect and recover from the very difficult last month. Quite simply, I would not have made it without you. My tears are of sorrow, but my total love and joy is with you. God bless you and keep you something. And excited. I love you so much, Rosemary. And as I said, they were together well before 2001, and were together until she passed in June of 2018. Shortly after getting married, to a picture from the wedding, and this one is not really relevant to Frank's story, but it's of my nephew and niece. I just put it up there to embarrass them. So they do seem suitably embarrassed, so we'll move on with our story. So the 2000s, they moved to Reno, and there's also a retirement. And it was kind of it was a gradual retirement, as he would do less and less at Bechtel, and ultimately, I don't know when exactly he ceased working there, but it was somewhere in the early 2000s. And that was a major challenge for him, because so much of his identity as a person was wrapped up in being the engineer, being the problem solver. That's kind of what he did, was problem solve, not only just engineering problems, but if you can imagine on a big construction project, maybe for a government here, or a foreign government, or maybe a foreign company, you're problem solving with people on a large project, and he was able to navigate both the engineering challenges of it, but also the political and people challenges of a large project and large organizations. And not having that created a real absence in his life, and I think he struggled with that a lot, and probably somewhat all the way to the very end. Tried some consulting, and had some ideas he was going to write a paper on physics and so on, but he was never quite able to. And he did things, they traveled, and came here, they did photography trips all over the place, although to this day I have never seen a single photograph that he took. So he was really into this. He had all these cameras, and he studied it, and he took classes in photography. But despite my suggestions, why don't you post? I think there are sites on the internet where photographers post their photographs for other people to see. No. His way, I don't know what he had any plans for it, but I never saw a single photograph that he had taken in his later stages when he was actually into really serious photography. Growing up, as we were young, he took lots of photographs, but he put them all in slides. Almost all of them were in slides. So we never saw them. So you have these great, so somewhere in the house up there, there should be a collection of slides that tells the story of our young years, but they're all in slides. So maybe we can find them, maybe we'll digitalize them or something. But that also was my father. And a few other pics here I found, not necessarily directly relevant to what we are talking about. Here's Doug, my brother, his daughter Jessica, his son Josh, Rosemary, and my sister Debbie, and they've had dinner together. And here's one with his brother and his wife Carol. And it was just a nice picture, so I included it in here. And here's another picture of Frank doing it his way. Okay. As we reach the end of our journey, we all suffer. There's to be, the body doesn't work like it used to, and sometimes the mind doesn't work like it used to. And there's a challenge that we're all going to either have or are going to have, and how we navigate that. And things had gotten to the point where after Rosemary passed, and here's a picture, same picture, just outside here. This was at Rosemary's service in June of 2018. And the young man in front there is John's son, David. So after Rosemary passed, he was lonely up there, and we tried to stay in touch with him, but I live in Redlands, California, and Doug and Debbie, they live in the Bay Area here. So we try to call, but there's no one there. There's no one there making his dinner for him. There's no one there taking care of his laundry. There's no one do all those things that for essentially his entire life, someone had been doing for him. And he was increasingly unable to do things like pay his bills. I pushed him just let me take care of it. And no, I'm going to get it set up on auto pay. No, I'll take care of it. No. Okay. The things were getting paid, and after we were just up there yesterday, I found a notice from the utility company. It was a 10-day termination notice. He was way behind on that. And unfortunately, they hadn't shut it off yet, and we got that paid. Starting in June of 19, and then we're now coming to kind of the end of the story and the end of my way. He took up with a woman who was 24 years his junior, and I'm not going to go into a lot of the details of what was there, but everyone around him warned him of, be careful with this. Take your time, be sure. But within a week of knowing her, he wanted to move in with him, and he was talking marriage. And this went on, and it was increasingly hard to even communicate with him. You would call 10, 20 times, no answer. No answer, no answer. You would call. Finally, sometimes he'd pick up the phone. And he was determined he was going to do this his way. On our visit up there at the end of January, I finally had persuaded him. He put me on his checking account. At that time, we got a printout of the accounts. And since from October through January, $140,000 was taken out of the account. And that doesn't count his income from his pension and Social Security that was also coming in and going out. We had, at that point, we had already talked to counsel, and we retained counsel. We were going to seek a guardianship over his estate to protect him, because he needs his money for however long. It turned out he didn't have that much longer to go, but you don't know that. You don't know in advance how much longer you have on your journey. And he couldn't afford $140,000 every 4 months. He's okay, but that's beyond what he could afford. And then I got a call Monday of the week that he passed. It was from the Reno PD. And there's 2 officers had been called to the bank. He had gone in there to withdraw another $2,000 or so from his account. And then he told the bank people, I don't want to do this, I'm being under duress. They called the police. The police come out, he denies, no, I didn't say that, I want this woman to have the money. So at that point, I moved, on the advice of the officers, I moved all the money out of the account into a separate account for safekeeping. My last conversation was on the Thursday before he passed, and he reaching, I tried to call him, here's what's happening, this is what's going to happen here, let's work this out. And not gotten through to him. So he calls me, and I didn't have a lot of time at that moment to talk to him. I had an appointment. He said, yeah, this is what's happened. We're going to be seeking a guardianship. Let's talk about this. And that was the last. And he was, needless to say, quite upset with the situation. And that's how we ended. And he passed on the next Saturday. Our information is that the Friday he was out with his new companion, shall we say. And she had called the paramedics. They tested him at a blood sugar of 400. But he refused to go into the hospital. And overnight, our information is he was experiencing chest pains. And this person left him alone. And he could have called 911, but didn't. And he passed sometime the next day, and his companion found him and called the coroner, and then about 3 o'clock that Saturday, on February 8th, Doug texts me and says the coroner had notified him. I don't know how I got his number as opposed to someone else's, but had notified him that our father had passed. And that's kind of how we ended up. And it's unfortunate, but I think we were doing the right thing by him at that point. And he may not have appreciated it at least then, and never had a chance to appreciate. We were trying to look out for him, but that's how we ended up. And you've now heard enough from me. We now have a time in which anyone else can tell their frank memory, their frank story, whatever's on your heart or minds to say about the guy who was important enough to bring you all here on a Saturday afternoon. Once we're done with that, we'll have a final song that I hope you'll think is appropriate for the occasion, and we will then have a mandatory group picture. At that point, everyone's free to either go enjoy the refreshments in the next room, or you can be on your way today. And on behalf of the entire family, our thanks for taking your time to come help us remember our father. So at this point, you can come up here in the front if you want to speak, or you can speak from there, however you want to do it. Anyone and everyone, you're welcome. Anyone? Something? Come on up.
Hello, my name's Tom Norris. I first knew Frank while consulting in acoustics. And for some of the oddball problems, sometimes Frank would call us in. And without going into the details, what I remembered most about Frank was obviously very, very bright. He loved to debate. But he also cared. If he saw me stepping out of line on something, and in his mind, he would say it. And I've known very few people that were willing to do that and put a relationship under a little bit of stress. So that is my favorite thing about working with Frank. The other thing is that Frank had given me enormous opportunities, some travel, and a chance to work on things that otherwise I never would have. So I'll always be grateful to Frank for that. We did know him up in Reno. Some of the calls were not returned. Now I understand why. I'll also mention that Frank, over the years, knew somebody that had schizophrenia rather severely in Detroit. And this gentleman always liked to call Frank. And about 2 weeks ago he said, for the last few months, Frank has not been returning the calls. Is Frank okay? And I said, I don't know
places you have to go.
Oh, okay, very briefly, nuclear plants and fossil fuel power plants all over the 48 states. And the trip I remember most vividly is a trip up to Alaska, to the North Slope, to work on a antifreeze pump for an oil well, which was misbehaving. And that will always be my favorite trip in 40 years of consulting.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything they would like to say? Please.
Hello. I met Frank, I think in 2000, 2000 probably. I was flying back from Taiwan. I don't know where he was flying back from. I didn't think that much that he had that much impact on my life. Maybe it's just a funeral, so pardon my emotion. I met him on the plane coming back. I don't know if he was sitting next to me, but I think he was married to his most recent wife, and I don't know, somehow he reached out and he would come here to either Walnut Creek or Custer Valley, and we would have lunch, sometimes in Oakland by the airport, and we would have lunch when he came to town, and he would give me advice on life, you know, just what my role in life was. He thought that there was nothing more attractive than a woman over 50 that had her life together. I don't know. He was a brilliant man, and like you said, you mentioned about Rosemary. I think the reason, and I think he talked about it every time we met, because he always talked about her, was that she did just let him be however he was, because he was an unusual character, and I don't think anybody was really that close to him. I'm not sure, I don't know him that well. That's what my impression was, and he really was in his own world, creating and solving, and I think he was probably one of the leaders in the world in his industry. It's interesting, and that this is what happens at the end of life. And I think I'm sad, because I heard the story, and he did reach out to me after his wife had died, and I think he was asking for some attention, and I didn't pay attention. So when I hear about the end of his life, that makes me so sad, and it makes me think about my life, how I should live it. It's important to think about what it's going to be like at the end, and who's going to be there with us, because that's scary. But anyway, Frank did have an impact on my life, and I know he impacted the world. A pretty brilliant person, and I'm just honored that I was invited or reached out to come to the funeral, because I'm such an honorable person. Thanks for having me, and I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything they would like to say? Ken?
Hi, I'm Ken Mark. I've known Frank since I joined Bechtel back in 1974, and he was supervisor of the noise and vibration control section. And I think, although I was a structural engineer, I got to work with him somewhat. My fondest memory is a test we had to do. We had to do a vibration measurement on something called a centrifuge balance stand. And what it required was that we take a giant sledgehammer, whack the darn thing, and measure the vibration and sort of determine the natural frequencies of the system, the damping and the natural frequency. Well, it required a whole bunch of equipment. We had to pack up 2 huge crates of equipment, had to rent a special car to take it all, and had additional information, additional stuff. And it was a real pain to sort of unload it So the day we went down to Seal Beach, I get a call when I'm at the airport, and Frank says, I'm sorry, I have to go back home to get something else. And I've forgotten what it was. As a result, I ended up going down there by myself, struggling with these 2 giant crates of equipment, going to the site, setting up, and taking some initial measurements. He came down later and said that I had done a decent job, but I still remember lugging all that equipment, and that was sort of Frank. I knew Frank presented papers every year or made presentations, and so he was really technically involved. I also think that Frank did that because he liked to travel every year. I mean, that gave him an opportunity to go to the Acoustic Society or wherever. And so the other thing I wanted to say, I wanted to talk a little bit about photography, since you sort of brought up, and I have a picture of Frank over here with his camera. It's his special camera. It's the Sony RX10, and he swore it was the best camera ever made, and he wouldn't give it up for anything else. One of the trips that Frank and I took was a trip to Egypt, and he went on an earlier trip to Jordan, and I joined the group in Cairo. And the first thing people said when I met the rest of the group that had traveled with Frank, they said, "Thank goodness you came here to take care of Frank." And I learned that was my job to sort of take care of Frank. Frank took a lot of pictures. I think he was more concerned, as the engineer, he was more concerned about the technical things about photography. He was more concerned that his camera had great depth of field, than the artistic characteristics. He took a lot of pictures. He put it different places, different hard drives. He had a hard time finding his pictures. But the thing that made him happiest about photography was that he took a session up here in the Bay Area where we had a woman that performed critiques of our work. And the thing that made him happiest, he had a separate meeting with her, and she evaluated his work and said, "Yes, Frank, you are a good photographer." And that made him extremely happy. And I know that Frank and I did a lot of traveling together. The last time I saw Frank, he and I went to visit a bunch of ghost towns in Nevada. We went to Bodie and Tonopah and Berlin and Gold Hill and a bunch of things. And he sort of enjoyed seeing ghost towns and taking pictures of equipment. That wasn't exactly my big deal, but I mean, he really liked mechanical equipment. And I remember the last time I talked to him over the phone, and he was difficult to reach. He said the next time he's in the Bay Area, he wanted to go to Point Reyes and Fort Ross. So I don't know how. Those are places that he wanted to go. And so Frank was a special guy. I'll miss him a lot. Thank you.
You did. Photographs here. This one here, he went to his last noise control conference. Oh, okay. If you don't know this, is his brother John.
First of all, I have to say, I've seen about 5 of Frank's pictures.
Okay.
Or 5 felt mine. Second, about the camera that he had. He liked to talk photography to me. He liked to talk cameras. Every time we talked about photography or cameras, he wanted me to buy one of those cameras. I said, "Frank, it's too big. I don't want to carry a large camera around anymore." he was 20 months older than I am. He was bigger, stronger, so forth when we were small. I can remember one time my parents were going out to dinner, and we were of the age now we no longer needed to have somebody, a babysitter, come in for us. How old were we? I'm guessing I was about 10 or 11, and he's almost 2 years older. Parents leave, we have the TV, we want to watch television. Aha, problem. He wants to watch something, and I want to watch something. Remember, he's 20 months older than I am. I came up with the idea of the TV set was in our living room, and there was a large rug that was in front of that, and then a couch. And I came up with, I said, Frank, if you want to, the first person who throws the other one off of that rug gets to watch the television program that they want. Remember, this was my idea, not his. As it turned out, it was a 30-minute television show. After about 45 minutes from when we started, neither one had thrown the other one off the road. That was a big, big happening in our lives. He and I got along much better after that happened. Second story, and then I went out for a track. Was I good at track? Doesn't matter. For some reason, we were both at the school where the football field is, the stand, so forth, and the oval, the track, and we're up there. Why we're there, I don't remember. But I was talking about track, and Frank said, I'm still faster than you are. Okay, Frank, let's race. And we did, it was about a 100-yard race, and I've forgotten how we got it started, so it was even, I think we threw something in the air, and when it hit the ground, we could both start. We got along a whole lot better after the first incident and the second incident. He knew that he could no longer was stronger than I was or anything else, and we got along a whole lot better the rest of our lives.
So,
Anyone else?
Hello. So happy to be here with our family. Frank. I met Frank about, I think it was about 10 years ago. And he came to see me because he was doing research and he knew I did a lot of research and that I'm intuitive and involved in things that his more mystical side was interested in. And Frank always showed up with a tablet. You know, him with his tablet, he had to write everything down. Wait a minute, had to write everything down and go over and over it again and again. And there was halting process. But he was so passionate about the truth and so passionate about wanting to contribute something to society. He really was looking to do that towards the end of his life. And I'd come up with all kinds of things, but he was so intent on correcting what he had in front of him that he never did get on to the information I brought to him. It took a lot of patience being with him. And I think one thing that I heard him say over and over again, and of course it was practical, but it just seemed like Frank was, hold the line. How many times did you hear him say that? Just hold the line. That should be written on his tombstone, hold the line. He also talked a lot about being a Boy Scout. He loved I watched him over time, you know, his health started to fail, and Rosemary was such a treasure and so gentle, like a little deer, and he loved her so much. I was with her till the very end. I think when they made Frank, they threw the mold out. He was original and is original. I think he'll always stay in our minds, and I'm just struck with, like, no, he's not really gone. And that feeling of disbelief. So I talked to him a lot, and on the phone a lot, because I knew he was lonely, and I wanted to keep in touch with him, and he did too. And I just think that we're going to miss him a lot. And thank you, Ben, for your portrayal. It was very lovely, very lovely. Let me see if there's anything else I want to say here. I know that he's probably over here right now listening to us all.
Right?
I know that if he's around to be a tour guide to us, and if we have a question, if we just think about it and we listen, I think we'll hear an answer back from Frank. I really do. So, one thing that was really interesting about it, boy, he could stick to a point that he'd get stuck, he'd get stuck. And I think his biggest opportunity was to learn about change and to learn about people, and be close to people, let them contribute to him, and he to their lives. So anyway, I just will listen. I wrote this briefly, but I can't even read it, so I was glad to be part of his life. Thank you so much.
Anyone else?
I have one more thing I forgot to say.
Okay.
The last time I saw Frank was in 2006 at the Trump rally in Reno.
16 or 6?
16. 2016, that's the last time I saw Frank.
Even though Frank would have enjoyed a good political discussion, we will pass on doing that on this occasion. So he leaves his family and his grandchildren, and his granddaughter will be getting married at the end of this year, and will be starting on her own. That'll be a major junction and road that she's going to be taking at the end of this year. And as well as a large collection of friends. This is a gift from Rosemary's Service. At this location, people that turned out for him on that occasion. And you have told us your way, and we have a final song, and if our she can bring it up. Yep. For the full screen. Full screen. anyone gets away, there will be a mandatory group picture. If it's not raining, we'll be out in front like all of our other, like the previous group pictures, and then you're either welcome to go on your way or join us for refreshments in the back room back there. And my sister found some really good stuff back there, so don't miss out.